This is episode 15 of Objectively Biased on a late Tuesday evening when we're recording this. This is Wilder Adams and John Tortorelli. And John, tell me, how's life been for you? It's been 10 days since we've recorded.
It's been a minute. It's been great. I enjoyed All-Star Weekend quite a bit. I know a lot of people have the reservations. We're going to talk about that. I've enjoyed getting to talk about basketball. I was on Pick a Side before, and I get to talk some ball with you. And we've got some pretty good topics today. We're going to reflect, look at our contenders, look at our pretenders, talk about some recent number one overall picks. So we got a good show coming up.
Yep, it's very stacked. And yeah, it's funny. You talked about All-Star Weekend, and we're going to start the show with that. But I feel like there's a culture issue right now with the NBA. It feels like we just love to complain about everything.
Yeah.
We're just not only the fans on Twitter, but now like on broadcasts. As an NBA fan, how are you going to be convinced this is a good product when the broadcasters are calling it a bad product? When people are telling us these players aren't the same as they used to be, that the NBA is doing a bad job marketing. We're hearing this on the broadcast for the NBA. I think there's such a deep problem that the All-Star game is a kind of a reflection of that a little bit right now.
I'm going to agree with you entirely because people like to complain. And the last couple of years, I felt like that's been apparent throughout the entire regular season. It's a long 5 months with 82 games. And a lot of those games are meaningless. And there's that culture of teams which have bottomed out to get their better draft picks. I think oftentimes that's kind of reflected the entire league as a whole. And to me, the All-Star game was a prime example of the NBA putting together a solid product. I liked the dunk contest. I thought it was really good. The three-point contest is always a hit. The players come to play. And the first two games of the All-Star game, I enjoyed a lot. I thought they were really fun to watch. Up until the presentation started to kind of take away from it. I thought I like Kevin Hart, but his gimmick was really annoying. And I felt it took away from I was like, kind of shut up. And I was like, let the game breathe. Especially when I was a kid growing up, letting the game and the crowd speak for itself is sometimes better with some empty, dead air on the mic. And then for as much as I appreciate the Inside the NBA TNT crew, I felt like in the middle of their third game, in the middle of the third All-Star game, it's 11-1 and the game stops to give them a 30-minute tribute. I felt that kind of dampened the mood in the middle of a game where it's like, is this halftime? Is this not halftime? And then the entire night there was commercials dominating the ad space. And I felt like we barely got an All-Star game with this new target score, 40 points. So I feel like every NBA fan's going to agree with this. The NBA needs to stop switching the format of the All-Star game every single year. Just make it East versus West. There are a couple of ideas they float around. Maybe the winning conference gets home court advantage in the finals. I don't like that as much because we saw that in the MLB where one conference would dominate and keep hosting and the other one would not. Some people float around maybe adding an extra team if you have multiple, where it's just all-star snubs. It's your Trae Youngs and your DeMontis Sabonis's, and they go up against the second team or the reserve all-stars. And the winner of that game gets to take the crown and take the label of all-star. Well, the losing team loses it. So the players are playing for the accolade itself. But what do you think? Do you feel like the All-Star game should have a certain format to fix it, or is it kind of just, it is what it is?
I love how quickly you just dive into every single detail and articulated it, just every facet of it. I kind of want to start. You talked about just the air, letting it breathe. And I think that's the perfect way to present it because the Kevin Hart thing was really distracting. And when I say the broadcasting, saying the product stinks, it's more like, those TNT shows, not the actual play-by-play and color commentator. So I'd want to throw them into that group.
Right.
But yeah, I think what you said makes a lot of sense in terms of the constant changing of the All-Star format. It's getting confusing. There's all these new rules all the time now in the NBA, and we have to follow them all the time. We had the draft a couple years ago. Now we don't have the draft necessarily. Now coaches are picking the teams, I think. Now all of a sudden the rising stars are in the game, and but they don't get the accolades. Like, I don't know. I think there needs to be some consistency too, because I think the culture of the NBA right now is let's solve the issue by changing the format of the league, when I don't actually think the format of the league is the problem. I think it's the presentation of the league. We talked about this months ago. I think it's a marketing issue in the NBA right now, which is the biggest issue. And the fact that we have a culture of, oh my gosh, look at all these players. They don't care about basketball. They don't defend. They don't want to play every night. This is a soft brand. Like, we don't do that in the NFL. We don't do that. It's every time we're on a TV show, we hear people talk about why Josh Allen's great and Patrick Mahomes, but today in the NBA, it's why this player isn't Kobe. It's like, okay, guys, let's take a deep breath. Honestly, in terms of the format, I think the format's, like I said, fine. I actually love the 40-point. I thought it was more competitive the first couple games.
Yeah,
I don't really know what happened the last game, but I thought the first couple games were really fun. And I honestly, my hot take with all of this, and I talked about this last year on What's on Tap NBA, I don't think the All-Star game should be in February. It should be in the summer. It makes no sense. Stephen A. Smith says, why don't you guys train or play in the All-Star game like it's the summertime? Maybe because it isn't the summertime. Maybe it's because it's the middle of the season. These players are coming off of playing 50-plus NBA games for the ones who don't load manage, and now they're expected to go in the middle of Indianapolis or Salt Lake City or San Francisco, which is a pretty nice location, but they don't really get a break. And these players want a break, and they see all their buddies going to Florida who don't go to the All-Star game or go to all these places around the world, and they're stuck in Utah, and they're doing media, and then they get 3 days off, and then they play a game on Friday. That format makes no sense. Make it in the summertime, maybe right before the summer league, so you have a full week in the NBA to just embrace the offseason. These players get a full season to prove their worth in such an all-star game type accolade instead of it being a 40-game award where if you miss 15 games, then that's your chances of making the all-star game. I just think it's at the wrong time of the year. Put it in the summer. Allow it to be kind of an event middle of the summer. I think players would actually appreciate that. Make this kind of the Christmas break of the NBA where everybody gets a week off. And I honestly think we're going to get a better product from stars. I think we're going to get less of LeBron James sitting in All-Star break.
Not going to mention Ant-Man in that, conveniently.
And two, if he's technically hurt, I don't want to get into that, but I think we're just going to get more committed players and a more fun product. And I just think that maybe we'll get more stars in the dunk contest if they're not worried about getting injured in it. There's certain things like that. The All-Star break should be in the summertime.
I like that because the NFL has had this issue too. I haven't watched the Pro Bowl since I was in like the first or second grade, and I never really cared. Even then, I'm like, this shit stinks. And I was like, the NFL could care less, and it's kind of worked out just fine from a ratings perspective. But the Pro Bowl's in the season. It's in the weirdest time because everyone's waiting for the Super Bowl, but they have to wait an extra week. But if you were to move the All-Star game into the summer, like let's say like the first day of Summer League, in theory, that could attract more people to Summer League. Maybe if a few guys sit out, but I mean, maybe if you sit out, you lose the All-Star credit and the accolade itself. And then players say, okay, I actually do want to play in this now.
They're in Vegas anyway. That makes fans go to Vegas. Make it just so it's Las Vegas. Make the All-Star game in Las Vegas every single year, like the NFL does with, Orlando or Hawaii in the past. Put it in Las Vegas and make it a big event for the Summer League. It's like a 10-day grand event to just, Summer League's technically 10 days, a 2-week grand event just to embrace the NBA when nobody's following the NBA.
That's a great idea. The question then becomes, do we have enough challenges in the All-Star weekend itself? Because let's be honest, even if you get rid of the All-Star game, you're still going to have people going to the event for the dunk contest, for the skills challenges, for the three-point contest, all of them. And there have been some ideas floated around, like you had a 1v1 competition, and I think it's a great idea. I love to see it, but maybe some players wouldn't want to put their pride on the line because the one-on-one competition is so much different from 5-on-5 basketball. There have been clips which have went viral this week of Cam Reddish cooking every single player in Lakers shoot-arounds, and he's like the 10th best player in the Lakers. He's someone who I think most basketball fans look at and say he is a bad NBA player, objectively. And then in 1v1, he can go up against a star and maybe take his lunch money. And now that star's reputation is going to be damaged. I mean, think of Paul George. Think about how much he gets ripped into. He gets torn apart for playing through injury when he's taking injections just to be on the court. Imagine if he lost to Cam Reddish in a one-on-one competition, how bad that would be for his reputation. But I will say one thing. People will complain. I like this All-Star weekend. I enjoyed the dunk contest. I watched it after the fact. I'm not going to lie. I missed it live. But my question for you would be, Mac McClung won this year. What would be the perfect NBA dunk contest next season to save the event and really just get it back on track to what it once was?
We saw Giannis Antetokounmpo talk about wanting to join.
Yep.
He comes off as an in-game dunker to me. I'm just speculating. I'm not sure he has all these tricks up his sleeve.
Right.
I think the dunk contest needs a combination of star power and the potential for creativity. And the first two names I think of for that is Zion Williamson and Ja Morant. I think you get those two in that event. Zion Williamson can do all those like windmill 360 dunks in game. Let's see him actually place that focus into an all-star game. Ja Morant, that guy floats in the air. And in the other two, just to bring back the 2010s, let's get Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon back in the game. The best dunk contest competition we've seen probably in NBA history. Get those two guys back in. Nobody's forgotten them. Zach LaVine's still a star, and Aaron Gordon's on a contender. So they have name, and they get Zion Williamson and Ja Morant in there, and watch those four boys cook.
I think that's awesome because I had three of those four names. Ja Morant in the dunk contest, I think will be a lot of fun just because of what we've seen, those glimpses in game. And I don't think he's just an in-game dunker. I believe he would have a lot of creative ones that he can add. Now, I would be remiss if we didn't put Mac McClung in here. I know a lot of people have given him a lot of flack because he's a two-way player. He's also a great G League player, and he has won the contest 3 straight times. I would like to see Mac go up against Ja Morant and the two names you just listed, Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon. And it has been some time since Zach and AG are in it. Had some years, maybe on the same pop athletically. If there are a few more names I could add, Derek Jones Jr., I think that's an obvious one. Zion's a great shout. I almost didn't think of him. But two more I would be curious to see would be the Thompson twins because they are freak athletes. Quite frankly, we haven't seen them in this type of setting, but if you were put them there, I could see them breaking some pretty sick dunks out. But there's also two more names. I'm going on my 9th and 10th options here. Shaedon Sharpe and Keon Johnson. Both of those guys have posted two of the highest verticals we've seen. I believe Keon's was the highest in NBA Combine history. You get Shaedon Sharpe, Keon Johnson, Aaron Gordon, and Zach LaVine in the contest, I think it's perfect. And there's so many names. We just listed 10. You get 4 of them. You get another 2 and then 2 recurring ones the following year. I think this could be kind of the revival of a competition, which 2-3 years ago was terrible. I think back the year where Jalen Green did it, and I forget who else did. It might have been an Obi Toppin one. Might be wrong. And I was saying to myself, this is the lowest point of the dunk contest in quite some time. But I do believe that Mac McClung and Stephon Castle this year put on, and they did a fantastic job. Stephon could have easily won. I loved his dunk, the up and under, when the guy set up from underneath the rim. He catches it, does the between the legs, some underneath the rim. That was insane. And then, of course, I think Mac McClung just needs a lot more respect because every single year he comes out, he puts on a show, he shows new dunks he couldn't think of. And unlike Blake, he jumped over in the middle of that car, wasn't he, on the hood? That was the middle of the car.
That was amazing. Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. I'm not saying I wouldn't want him on. I was just thinking about it in the lens of we need to get names back in the dunk contest.
Yeah.
You can argue Mac McClung is the most impressive dunk contest contestant we've had in the last 15 years. And that includes Zach and Aaron Gordon. He just has more tricks than probably everybody. So I totally get having him there and trying to four-peat. I think I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I just think the NBA needs to go back to let's get names. That's why I'm kind of like on Derek Jones and Keon Johnson. No disrespect to those guys, great athletes, but who made the dunk contest? It was the Vince Carters of the world. It was Kobe. It was Dwight Howard, Dominique Wilkins, Blake Griffin. Those guys make the dunk contest. When you don't have names like that, and every year it's just like the rookies like Montas Pizelis and Stephon Castle and Andre Jackson, who I saw like miss a windmill in transition. I mean, no disrespect to those guys. Maybe one day they will earn that name to do it. I just think the NBA needs to go back to making it a named competition. It's about the names that make that competition great. as much as it is. Look at the fancy dunks, because at this point, we're at that point in the human evolution history where all the dunks that looked so impressive 20 years ago aren't impressive anymore. So you need to flip the mindset of, if you're never going to get overly impressed by the dunk anymore, because we've almost seen everything, it needs to be about who's doing the dunk.
Right.
That's where we're at right now. We're just not impressed with it. It's like 50 years ago, if you have this little thing and you can just look up anything in the world, we're like, oh my gosh, what is this devil device? But today, it's like all of us have a smartphone. It's the same thing with dunking. All these guys can just do crazy dunks now.
That's a good point. If you want names, we need the Thompson twins to compete against each other. Because to me, I think they're like the two best examples of players who have the athleticism, but just need the stage to show some pretty creative in-game dunks that they haven't used just yet. Beyond that, though, I want to say shout out to Tyler Hero, because I thought Buddy Hield was going to win. At a point, I thought Darius was going to win. A lot of great shooters in the competition, but I'm not surprised because he is one of the best stationary shooters.
That contest stunk, man. Let's just say how it is. Well, 5 of the guys were bad in the first round.
Yeah.
And then the finals, the guy who won the 3-point contest at 24? Are you kidding me? I don't know the exact numbers of the recent ones, but my memory recalls pretty much all of the recent champions having over 28 in the match they won. Whether it's Klay Thompson, Buddy Hield, Steph Curry, Karl Anthony Towns, those guys had big numbers in the finals. 24 won in the 3-point contest, and he had 19 round one.
Yeah.
That's just right place, right time, man. Sometimes it isn't about who you are or how good you are. It's just being at the right place at the right time. And Tyler Hero is a great shooter, but man, that contest stunk.
I didn't think it stunk, but it does sound like you're saying Buddy Hield's the first quarter merchant, and I want to disagree.
Oh, by the way, I was joking on Twitter. I knew Cade Cunningham was going to have a bad round one. The moment I saw him trying to pull the ball from his left side, I mean, any basketball shooting coach will tell you, if you're doing a shooting drill, put the ball on the side of your shooting hand so you're not doing this constant motion, which is excessive energy, and you're never in the same balance every time grabbing it from your left. I was like, this guy did not work on the 3-point contest at all, because I could have told him with high school basketball as my ceiling as a talent, that was a bad idea. And he was still doing it. I was like, dude, I could have beat you in a 3-point contest that day. That's where I was. I was like, don't grab it from your left side. Grab it from your right side. That was bizarre.
Right, that's fair. Yeah, that definitely makes it harder on yourself. But
did you notice that? Was that bugging you as much as
no,
me?
I did not notice that until now. But now I'm kind of recollecting it. Does check out.
It was stupid. It was. I think it takes like 20%. I bet he would have gotten like 19 or 20 just by putting it on his right side. I think he had 16, which was higher than I thought he would get. But
yeah, it might have been that or 14, one or the other.
14 or I think it was 16. I think he would have gotten 5 more points just by the most simple fundamental on shooting drills. So, Cade, come on, man. I don't know. That I think I was just in a bad mood that night because I saw a lot of bricks that night. But you know what? It's okay, Cade. You're still going to be pretty high in our number 1 pick ranking, I bet. So,
yeah.
Is that a good way to transition, by the way?
Perfect way.
Okay, so we are going to talk about the last 10 number 1 overall picks. So we've been talking a lot about the last 5 number 1 overall picks being incredibly impressive, right? The Zions, the Ants, the Cades, the Victors, and the Paolos. We're going to go another 5 years back and kind of combine them. So we're going to go all the way back from 2015. Karl Anthony Towns in 2015, Ben Simmons in 16, Fultz in 17, 8 and 18, then Zion 19, Ant 20, Cade 21, Paolo 22, Victor 23. And do we do Versace 24?
Yep.
Zachary Versace as well is going to be on this ranking. So we're going to do it in a draft type platform. So you know what, John? You get the number 1 overall pick, okay?
Really? That's really nice, because when we did the Players the Builder round, I also got the number 1 overall pick, and
I'm a giving person. You know, that's just who I am.
Player. Okay, so I know why you want the 2nd overall pick more, which I get.
Because I have a very giving heart. Like,
wow.
That's
convenient. It's convenient for you today.
No, I just, you know, I'm a very compassionate person, and I love to just, spread joy. Like, I can take the number 2 overall pick if I can see the pleasure in your eyes of having the number 1 overall pick. That's
Okay,
just who
listen,
I am. So
if I do this and we're doing a snake, you cannot let this guy fall past 3.
we'll see what happens. I think I know who you're talking about, but we'll
You
see.
know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay.
All right, you get number 1.
Redrafting the last top. Okay, I'll try that again. Redrafting the last number 1. redrafting the last redrafting the last 10 number 1 overall picks. I'm going to start off, and with the first overall selection, I'm going to take Victor Wembanyama. There have been some discussions that, especially in some of our comments recently, that maybe we glaze Wemby a little bit too much. We praise him. But for him to produce at the level that he does offensively, 24 and 11 on a league average efficiency, improving his 3-point shooting this year while being the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year, the best rim protector this season, I don't think it's glazing whatsoever. He has been the best player defending the rim. He's been the best floor raiser for his team, and he just turned 21 years old. So when you think about how much of his offensive ceiling is still untapped, on top of the fact he is a top 5 defender in the world, I think it's pretty justified. He is the very definition of a recent NBA unicorn. So I don't think you can really go with any of these next guys above him.
Le meilleur talent que nous ayons vu, which means he's the best talent we've seen. Victor Wembanyama is the most gifted basketball player we have ever seen. It doesn't mean he is going to be the best player we've ever seen, but in modern basketball history, I didn't see Wilt Chamberlain. Okay, I didn't see Wilt. He might be the other guy, but Victor, in terms of pure freak gifts, has the highest ceiling we've seen. Like, just the peak version of Victor could be the most dominant player we've ever seen.
Above Hakeem,
yes.
LeBron,
Pure peak, yes.
Kareem,
yes.
And Jordan?
Yes, we're just saying the best version of Victor, which is one of the most skilled. Let's just say it, wing/big at his peak is going to be 7'4". If he puts it together, one of the most skilled non-guard creators in the league, the most damaging defender in the league, who's got feel, who's got a handle, who you just can't take away from the rim because he's got a 9-7 standing reach. The peak version of Victor could be the best player ever. It doesn't mean he will be, but that's the ceiling we have. So in that scenario, we just say, okay, he's number 1. Now, number 2, because I was incredibly giving. With the second overall pick, I'm going to take Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is pretty easily number 2 for me as well, because while we talk about Victor's incredible talent, Edwards in his prime could end up being the best athlete and shooter in the league. You can make that case. The guy who was voted as the most athletic player in the NBA by GMs last year is now having the best 3-point shooting season of any player in the NBA currently, over 41.5% and 4 makes a game. That's really hard to do, especially off of pull-ups and the difficulty he's doing it and the weird spacing he had to start the year. That's Steph Curry type crap we're talking about. So we've seen what he can do as an athlete. We've seen the flashes defensively. He's still putting it together mentally, but you can see the visions of everything he could be. And he's already a top 10 player. If it comes all together where his intuition as a decision maker, on top of knowing when to be a dominant slasher and a dominant shooter and a great situational defender, he could be the second best player in the league someday. So he's pretty easily number 2.
I would agree. Now, we're doing a snake here, or am I going up next?
You can go next.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because while I agree Ant-Man is number 2, I think you recently said Steph Curry with a 40-inch vertical, quite possibly. It's what he's been this season.
I indeed said that.
And it's not hyperbolic at all. With the third overall selection, I'm going to pay homage to a player who recently, I scheduled some tweets out. I scheduled one from 2 months in the past, not really thinking too much of it. And I realized suddenly then after that we left him a little bit lower in our rankings than we probably should have, and probably underrated him quite a bit then. That's Cade Cunningham, the third overall pick. I believe Cade Cunningham right now should kind of be locked in with the season that he's having for Detroit to be above 500 with one of the better offenses in the NBA. He has single-handedly lifted a team up after losing their number 2 in Jaden Ivey, who was the only established second grader they had, to 13th in points a game and 15th in offensive rating. Now, they've been fortunate to have a top 10 defense, but Cade's contributed to that. And when you look at his game, This year, it's come together with an elite playmaking package, high level scoring. He's getting 25 points a game on respectable efficiency, 35% from three, 85% at the foul line, getting there 5 times. And then on his twos, he's right at 50% as well. Talking about one of the best mid range scorers in the league. And when I'm ranking players around the NBA, I've got him in my top 15 right now. After missing almost the entirety of his second season in the NBA, he's really only in year 3 to me. And I feel like the progression that he's taken from last year to this season, just with one coaching change, has spoken volumes. Some people may cite some of the deficiencies, high turnovers, maybe not picturesque efficiency, but I believe part of that's a byproduct of a supporting cast where your second best player is playing on a $6 million contract this year. Malik Beasley's having an incredible season, but it's also no coincidence he's having his best season in years alongside Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, Cade coming into the draft, this is the player we envision in terms of this hyper versatile, hyper creative, 6'7" guard with the two-way ability, the 3-level scoring, the passing. There's not a lot of players like that. So you take that number one. And this year is the first year he's really put that into words because he was won a ton in high school, helped Oklahoma State overachieve, even though they couldn't play March Madness that year from a different case. But this is the year we've finally seen him become that high-level winning player. And I think, like you said, it's because situationally it's been a piece to. And outside of Jalen Brunson, I don't think there's been a clear better guard than him in the Eastern Conference this year. Donovan Mitchell is having a great season on a great team. I'm not sure he's been independently better than Cade Cunningham this year. So that's how good Cade has been. And if he can continue that efficiency and help that rise, I hear Detroit Pistons fans always complain, like, why do we always get the 5th pick? It's because you get one Cade Cunningham in your rebuilding era. So Cade is, I think, giving Detroit fans a lot of hope again.
Can I just add a little more to that?
Sure.
When you look at that lineup, Tobias Harris, I mean, they gave him a $25 million deal over 2 years to 50 because they had no one else to pay. And Philadelphia wanted to get rid of him. He this year has been playing fine. Definitely not his best seasons like he did early in Philly. After that, it's Tim Hardaway Jr., who the Mavericks threw to the side. Malik Beasley, who nobody wanted a year ago, signed a minimum contract on the Bucks, had a solid season. Jalen Duren, who has not developed really at all, is a young 21-year-old center. Asor Thompson, who's an excellent defender, still very raw offensively. And then Simeon Fontecchio, Isaiah Stewart, and Dennis Schroeder, who they picked up and has struggled outside of Brooklyn. To have that supporting cast as the 5th seed, the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, 3 games above 500, is truly incredible. I think the coaching, JB Bickerstaff, deserves a lot of the credit for their defense improving. But that is one of the worst supporting casts. That's arguably a bottom 3 supporting cast in the NBA, even still. I mean, last year was 30th in the NBA. This year it's probably 28th, 27th. Because you look at the Jazz have John Collins, Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson. That supporting cast clears this. And that's the second worst team in the Western Conference. So I think Cade Cunningham, the floor that he has given this team is remarkable. Like Devin Booker, he reminds me of D-Book quite a bit, where they're drafted into dysfunction. Obviously different because D-Book was the 13th pick. Cade was the first, right? But D-Book took 5 years to make the playoffs when he got Chris Paul, Jay Crowder, and Monty Williams. Ironically, Monty came to Detroit. Kind of set everything on fire. But he got a all-star guard and a multitude of quality wins. Mikal, Jay, Cam Johnson, the first overall pick, DeAndre Ayton. I mean, Cade has a couple of minimum contracts, and he's doing the same thing this year. So I've been not quite the second seed in the Eastern Conference good, but I think it doesn't get talked about enough that this year he has been like the best ceiling, the best floor raiser of any of these young players, I feel.
It's so hard to talk about like best and worst supporting cast in the league because sometimes it isn't about your supporting cast, but how your supporting cast just fits your best player. Last year, that Pistons team just couldn't shoot. Right. And this year, it's their league average shooting team. I think that by itself made a huge difference for Cade Cunningham because you can look at it and say, look, it's not that much more impressive than Utah's. Utah doesn't have a Cade Cunningham. Their best player is a play finisher in Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah.
So I think it's more about you have a great all-NBA case type player this year. and you just gave him floor spacing because he's just not freaky enough physically to just overcome bad spacing and get to his spots at the rim. How many people can do that? So you
Right.
give him floor spacing, and now he has the freedom to make decisions, and you have a culture. Because Detroit, I wouldn't say it's a bottom three cast in the league because they have a lot of high-level athletes, and that's been a big reason with coaching why they're an above-average defense. And now they just have
Right.
enough floor spacing to allow Cade Cunningham to do what he does. So it's a puzzle piece that has worked. It's just basketball is a giant game of chess, as we all know. Cade Cunningham has a team that better fits his skill set compared to other years. And for a lot of stars, I think that makes a huge difference.
That's a good point.
And now, number 4 overall pick. I think this is still pretty easy. This guy's been down lately. Not great.
No.
But I'm still going Paolo Banchero here. I'm going with the 4th pick. I'm going to go with Paolo Banchero. So Paolo, he was fantastic to start the year. Before he got hurt, he had that 50-point game. He comes back, and he looks great right away. I think he dropped like 34 on Cleveland, like right away.
Yeah.
And then ever since, he's just struggled. And he and Franz, they've been butting heads, not literally, but just on the floor stylistically. And then, now this Magic team is tanking. I still believe, like Cade Cunningham in Detroit, you give Paolo proper spacing, and Orlando doesn't have great spacing right now. He is one of the scariest on-ball threats in the league. With that size, with that coordination, that feel, that shot making when he's comfortable. It's unfortunate that he's not a comfortable shooter, a good shooter, but he's still so incredibly gifted. And I think when he gets figured out, when he gets healthier, when the roster makes a little more sense over time, we are going to go back and see that all-NBA trajectory.
Yeah, it's been really tough to glean a whole lot from the situation because obviously it's the worst spacing in the NBA. I mean, this team's shooting 33% from 3-point land. And I've talked about it before. This is maybe the first time I've seen a team where not one active player is shooting 35% or higher from three. Their best shooter tore his ACL multiple months ago. And
Yes.
after that, everybody else, with the exception of Corey Joseph, I mean, he's taking 1 3-point attempt per game, playing 7 minutes. I'm not going to count him.
Mm.
Every other player in this team is 33% or lower. Gary Harris, Tristan Da Silva, Cole Anthony. They brought in KCP this summer with the hope that he would be that floor spacer. But my gripe with that move is that they set their sights too short on a 31-year-old, leaving Nikola Jokic that wasn't giving them the much needed shot creation and kind of overlap with Jalen Suggs quite a bit because Jalen Suggs is a two to me who can play make. But having him be the de facto point guard, who's really a secondary creator, was kind of holding him back. And I felt their front office should have really added a shot creator to alleviate the pressure off of their wings. So I agree with Paulo at 4, and he hasn't progressed this year, but I have a tough time blaming it on him. You know, he tore his oblique, and then Franz did 6-8 weeks later. And on top of that, I mean, we talked about terrible sporting cast, but when you really highlighted you need a cast that fits your skill set, it puts into perspective that the Magic have a great infrastructure on defense. They're second in the league in opponents' points and defensive rating, but you have to find two-way players. And right now they have very few of them. So Paulo at 4, I like. Number 5, I'm going with someone who's obviously near and dear into your heart. You watched him for 9 years in Minnesota. That's Karl Anthony Towns, who this year in New York has come in and been one of the most impressive offensive players in basketball. I mean, you're talking about 25 and 13 on 50, 40, 84 shooting splits. Now, there are some questions with Cat. Can he be, the primary rim protector on a contending team? The answer is no. But if you pair him alongside a high-level defensive athlete at that 5 spot, I think you could see him be exactly what he was a year ago. That's a number 2 on a contending team. We saw him do all the dirty work, kind of sticking his nose. The analogy I'm about to use here is off, but for the lack of a better term, getting his feet really into the mud and doing all the little things in Minnesota, being a solid defensive piece, being a plus connective playmaker that even if he wasn't kind of generating those advantages, he was just playing off Anthony Edwards very effectively at the 4. And I think this is someone who kind of gets underrated a little bit because he's been versatile in the past. Offensively, you put him at the 5, you have an elite player. You put him at the 4, and he'll find a way to make an impact in both ends. So I like Cat here in this kind of middle tier because honestly, I do believe that you put him in the right spot, he can be number 2 still.
And if you compare him to Paolo Banchero the first 3 years, I mean, Cat's undisputedly better. Undisputedly. Cat came into the NBA right away, one of the most efficient offensive players in the league. And the offense has never been the question for him. I think he was probably, like if I was Cat, man, I would hate Jimmy Butler to the core because I think Butler set a stain on his reputation as a developing 22-year-old kid that he was never going to just break off unless he won a championship in Minnesota or moved to a big market. And we've seen him move to a big market in New York, and now he is getting the praise he's deserved for a long time.
Yep.
He's healthy again. He's playing his natural position. Karl Anthony Towns is capable of being a top 12 player in the league on a good year. That's never been the question. I'm not learning anything new about Cat. We just need to see, okay, in the biggest moments, what is he going to do? And we're going to learn in the playoffs this year because you have to deal with KP and the Celtics and those bigs in Cleveland.
Yep.
So if Karl Anthony Towns can show up against those bigs, he is going to save a lot of his reputation. And look, he is a 5-time All-Star, I believe, 5 times, right? 5. 5-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA player after this year because I expect him to make All-NBA. And that type of resume, most number 1 overall picks don't have. So I think he's been one of the most disrespected players in the league, and he's proving how ridiculously gifted he is on the offensive end.
Well said.
And now the number 6 pick, and now I feel like there's a drop-off.
Yeah.
No, there's not a
steep.
drop-off. Not a huge drop-off, actually. Let me think about this.
It depends on how you frame it.
Yeah, totally right. There's 2 guys who I have next to each other, okay? I'm just going to say both are big names.
Yeah.
Both have all-star appearances. Both have mindset questions. And both have health questions. So, do you like spinach or broccoli here?
I like broccoli.
I've thought about this.
Yeah.
You're a broccoli guy.
Yep. Big broccoli guy.
You can put like garlic and stuff on broccoli. You can't really do that with spinach.
No. Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. So, this is hard. Okay, I'm hurting because I made pick 7 so easy for you. Pick 6.
I wouldn't overthink it, quite honestly. Yeah.
Pick 6. With the 6th pick, I'm going to take Zion Williamson. He's had a up and down career. He's been hurt. The Pelicans are bad. And there's character questions. There's defensive questions. I don't think he's even peaked in a winning impact as high as Ben Simmons. You could argue, year two, peak Ben Simmons are close.
Yep.
But Zion Williamson this year in 28 minutes, I believe, is averaging 24. So when he plays, he's still really darn good. And as much as I question his longevity, I don't think he's going to just get released like Ben Simmons did to sign with the Clippers in the middle of his prime. Yep. So I'm just going to go with, I still will bet on Zion Williamson's long-term trajectory, even though that contradicts every Zion argument I've had for the last 4 years. So you know what? Number 6, hi Zion.
Yeah, his peak is right there with the Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, his second season in the NBA is one of the most impressive years. It's a lot like Cat, where Cat came in 25-12 year 2. Zion Williamson year 2, 27-7. He's getting the foul line 9 times a game, and he wasn't even getting a great whistle, and 62% true shooting. So from like an offensive, the skill, he's one of the best finishers in the game. The physical dominance, it's a close thing to Giannis. And the year after, he misses the entire season. 2023 plays 29 games. 2024 plays 70, and then has 40 on the Lakers, and Anthony Davis in the playing game gets injured, doesn't come back. And then this year he's played 18 games. So the peak is there. It's just a matter of, if you're trying to build around him, you have to build 2 machinations of your lineup. One for when Zion's on the floor, and then the other for the 55% of games he is going to miss. Partly because with how dominant a player he is, his body cannot withstand the rigors of an NBA season and maintain that without breaking down. And I look at him as someone who has high peak, but probably won't age gracefully with that in mind. Now, number 7, I'm going to go with Ben Simmons because I believe of the remaining 4 players, he has the most impact. And I'll be quite honest with you, everything I'm going to talk about is really going to be based off of his past. His first 4 years in the NBA, where he was an All-NBA player, a runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, And in Philadelphia, he was kind of ideally a number 3 that was masquerading as number 2. Now in Los Angeles, he kind of gets to be this glue guy, maybe this might sound disrespectful, a more gifted Kyle Anderson. Like, this is a very solid role player that can be a good passer, pretty good damn passer, but just obviously can have a lot of limitations. And you can't close a game with him, unfortunately. But for 20 minutes a night, he can be a quality 6 man. He can be Mr. 9, 6, and 7. So it's just really disappointing with Ben Simmons because for as much as he impacts the game on both ends, and he has lost a lot of the athleticism from his back injuries, he has everything but the kind of assertiveness and the confidence to fail and then get back up and keep playing. Because I felt like he is an example, a testament of a player who was so afraid to be aggressive. He was so afraid to get to the foul line and get fouled and push the ball and attack the paint that he basically had to rewire how to play basketball again. And it's like a mental framework. It's a mental example of just how much basketball is based off of your assertiveness and your poise. And I think it's unfortunate because he could still be 80% of the player was in Philly, and he feels like he's probably close to like 60%. So I'm hoping it works out in Los Angeles. But for the sake of this, we're going to have him represent that lower tier, number 7.
I think that's fair. And with the 8th pick, I'm going to go with DeAndre Ayton, one of the 5 most frustrating players in basketball, man. And he went number 1 in a draft with Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Trae Young, Jaren Jackson Jr., and you can go on and on and on. Great draft. He goes number 1. And here's the crazy thing. At the time, it wasn't crazy because he looks like David Robinson coming into the NBA. But he's just missing it up here, man. He comes off as charismatic off the floor until he really gets punched in the mouth. And then he just kind of hides under a desk. That's always been my read on DeAndre Ayton. Very anti-attention to detail. And I think those factors have made him from kind of a potential David Robinson type player to like a modern Hassan Whiteside. And that is really disappointing because even today when he's kind of, found his little, wait, okay, no. For a second I thought of Andrew Wiggins, but that's 2014, so we're good. Yeah. DeAndre Ayton is kind of settled in that 15 and 10 guy, and I think that's just who he is going forward. So it's pretty disappointing.
I mean, absolutely. I feel like his case and Ben Simmons' case, 2 of the biggest examples of mental lapse. He is like Mr. Empty Stats. Like, he'll produce, but the impact has not been there in spite of him being a top 3 player on team within the finals just 3 years ago. So I kind of wish we kind of got to see more of that. But in Portland, he's just going to do his thing. He's going to be 14 and 11. He's going to be productive in fantasy basketball, and that's going to be just about it. So,
and he's going to be the 3rd most impactful center on his roster, but getting the most minutes and money.
That's a good point, too. Now, he does play a lot of games, and Rob Will doesn't do that. Now, number 9, it's my turn. And the last 2 options are Markelle Fultz and Zachary Richichet. I'm taking Zach, but that's really it's because I'm optimistic. Last 9 games, 15 points a game, 46% from three-point land. The defense on the ball is going to be there. Just a matter of him getting familiar, acclimated into this Atlanta system, playing off Trae Young. And that last pick is obviously going to be Markelle. I want to say this. And this are based off of who is the better prospect. Markelle Fultz would be in my top 5. He'll be in the upper half of this list. But obviously, just things didn't quite pan out in the NBA. And now he's in Sacramento. I'm looking forward to seeing him play because I still really look at him as like one of the most entertaining bench guards in the game. And I can't help but not root for him every single time he's out there.
Yeah, totally. Zach, and look, we talked about it. Zach, weird draft 2024. There was nobody special enough to not take a fit if you're a team like Atlanta. I get it. Zach is going to be a good NBA player. He has size. When he is confident as a shooter, and that's just the biggest thing with him. When he's confident as a shooter, he's a really good shooter because he's got a really good base as a shooter. So once he figures out that base, and he's a really smart player, very intuitive cutter, connected passer, and he looks big on an NBA floor. He just looks big on a court.
Yeah.
He's
6'9".
a legit 6'9". legit 6'9". And those type of players, Mikal Bridges got traded for 5 first-round picks. OG Anunoby, he signed a $212 million contract.
He did.
If Versace is going to give you 15 to 16 in the NBA and good defense and size, this list, it doesn't matter where he ranks on this list because teams are going to value that. Teams are going to pay that. Teams are going to trade for that. So Atlanta, when they took him number 1, I didn't disagree with the pick necessarily because if you like him as a player and you think his archetype is going to work, he's going to be worth as much as anybody in that draft class. So I totally like a Trae Young, better player than a Mikal Bridges, but I don't think he fetches as much as Mikal Bridges. That's the kind of dynamic I think that archetype gives.
Right. I'm optimistic with him because, like you said, he has the intangible makeup, he has the physical tools, and you put him next to Trae Young, and the amount of open corner threes he's going to get is going to be absurd. You just moved DeAndre Hunter. I think there's a vote of confidence in this front office and Zach. And what do you know this year? Shooting 43% on corner threes as a rookie.
And in France last year, he had a really good playoff run, which I think kind of cemented him as the number 1 pick because he plays like a Morocco and then he drops 20. And that's a EuroLeague team he played really good against as an 18-year-old kid. I mean, I think when he went number 1, that was really what separated him was the resume against good players because he wasn't really productive and efficient at all before last year. But then he started showing up in big games and getting rebounds and scoring off the ball. So, this last 10 number 1 overall picks have been pretty good. And somebody has to be 9 or 10. And with the 10th pick, we are going to go with Markelle Fultz. Like you mentioned, just honestly a sad story in which we will never know the answer to. We've had theories of he hurt his shoulder. I've heard a motorcycle rumor. I've heard there's so many layers to this. I'm not sure what it was. It was probably, an accumulation of a lot of things. We'll never know. We just know the product, and it's disappointing. We don't know the answer, so it's hard to really directly attack him like we can attack Ayton for not reaching his potential. But
anyway,
Sacramento, hopefully he shows out, and I think we're all rooting for him.
Absolutely. And if I could add one more thing, Markelle Fultz coming out of college to me was like the perfect guard. He had an elite pull-up game. He's the 6'5" acrobatic finisher who wasn't a great defender in college, but in the NBA he became that partly because he had to in order to thrive. He became a starting point guard on 2 separate playoff teams. And in Orlando, he made himself one of the best mid-range scorers in the game. But of course, he tore his ACL in his 4th season, 2021, dealt with a couple of other injuries that also stockpiled onto that. But at the end of the day, for him to experience as much setbacks and challenges in the NBA and to still end up being a starter on multiple playoff teams, I think is a huge W. And I forgot to mention in there, he was a pretty good playmaker too in Orlando as well. So he made an impact. And I believe for the Kings, you have him off your bench, you have yourself not only a fun player, but an impactful one.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny. I think of Markelle Fultz, and it's kind of like Dylan Harper this year, in which it's like, wow, this is like the perfect 6'5", 6'6" guard who can pull up and play make and do all these things. And I mean, Fultz and Harper kind of both went into situations that weren't expected to be high winning situations, but Fultz was more productive than Harper, and Harper was incredible to start the year, but he's been sick and hurt. So I don't really worry too much about Harper, but it's a very similar dynamic between those two as prospects.
Yeah, they're very similar players. If I ask you one more question.
Sure.
So 2 of my favorite players in this draft class, and neither of them to me were the number 1 overall prospect. I had a couple of players who I liked more. But I kept coming back to these 2 wings, Zachary Richichet and Matas Buzelis. Matas, his last 8 games has been fantastic in Chicago. He's got more minutes, has thrived off the bench. Who do you think will be the better player long term?
It's funny because I don't know if you remember the beef they had on social media that was completely one-sided on Matas because
he's talking to himself.
I don't think we heard back from Zachary there. So it was just one-sided beef. I think of them as very different prospects. So I think Matas is boom bust, and I think that Versace is high floor, moderate ceiling. Because I don't think Versace is going to fail. And I still like Matas had an amazing 25-point game on perfect shooting. Outside of that, he hasn't been that good, and he's
Right.
got an upright handle still. He's still kind of weak, can't really shoot yet. Zachary is the clear better player right now. But if Matas can add the skill on top of what he is athletically at 6'11", and he has that makeup, that's a guy who's got swing all-star ability. If I had to put my money on it, though, I would put my money on Zach as an overall prospect compared to Buzelis because I just trust the floor so much more. And Buzelis has so many things he needs to work on. Now, if he goes back to being the shooter he was in high school and he becomes less upright and tightens that handle, he could be a very dynamic modern wing. But I just need to see those things.
That's valid. And I probably would lean with Risa Shea too for the same reasons. Now we're going to recap this. Ranking the last 10 number one overall picks in the NBA. Number 1, Victor Wembanyama.
With the second pick, Anthony Edwards.
Third overall pick, Cade Cunningham.
Fourth overall, who's fourth? Fourth overall, Paolo Banchero.
There you go. I should have Texas in the chat. We're good though. With the fifth overall pick, Karl Anthony Towns.
With the sixth overall pick, Zion Williamson.
With the seventh overall pick, Ben Simmons.
Eighth overall, DeAndre Ayton.
Ninth overall, Zachary Richichet.
And last and unfortunately least, Markelle Fultz.
Respect to Markelle. Shout out to Markelle.
With the 10th pick, I'm just going to say it one more time. I just wanted to say unfortunately least. 10th overall, Markelle Fultz. Sorry, I thought that was funny.
You'll never get me to hate Markelle forever.
I don't hate Markelle Fultz. That's why I said the word unfortunately.
Yeah. I can never say a bad thing about him, and I won't.
I got attacked on Twitter the other day because I said if Anthony Edwards skipped the All-Star break, and then people were commenting like, you're an idiot. He didn't skip it. He was hurt. And I was like, I said if.
Yeah, no.
I said if, everybody. But
gotta be careful nowadays.
That was a fun, long segment. And we're going to end this one, I'm sure, on a little more of a, I would say, concise section. We're going to cap it off with just revisiting some potential contenders and pretenders. And John, my first team for you, is the Denver Nuggets a contender or pretender?
This question's easy. They're a contender. I look at what Christian Brown's been this year and replacement of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's been a way better player. And Denver got themselves a more versatile defensive player to put on the likes of Shea or Ant-Man. Well, maybe he can't shut those guys down, of course, because very few can. This year, he has been one of the best offensive players within his role in the NBA. We're talking about someone who's shooting 37% from three on small volume, but then 65% on twos, averaging 15 points a game, and his first year as a starter while being a huge plus as a defensive player. And then their bench has gotten a lot of good contribution from Russell Westbrook. He stepped up quite a bit. And honestly, I think he's one of the biggest X factors this postseason because off the ball, him and Jokic together has been a perfect fit. And it feels like we're kind of coming back on that Russell Westbrook arc of him getting back to him being in Houston, not the same player, but someone who's been a malleable and complementary piece that doesn't have to have the entire offense built around him. After that, you have Peyton Watson playing his role, kind of if he's what Jeff Green was in their championship run 2 years ago. That's all you can ask for as your seventh man. And then, of course, I want to shout out Julian Strawther, who's played his role. So they got an 8-man rotation. MPJ's playing his best ball. Jamal Murray stepped it up quite a bit. And, of course, you got the best player in the world. So I don't think about this at all. They are a contender. The question is whether or not you would favor them in a series versus OKC.
In the Western Conference, I just don't think there's a lot of contenders. And I think Denver, you have to say them because outside of OKC, and I don't think you can even say OKC with historical reference, who do you trust more right now? And Jokic is the best player in the league. And we see with a lot of players leaving, like KCP, their value goes down when they leave Nikola Jokic. We're seeing Christian Brown break out, and Westbrook's playing his role. And you mentioned all the other big names, MPJ, Jamal Murray starting to put it together. They're obviously contenders. I agree.
I don't understand why more guys don't want to play with Jokic when they see that.
Oh, my gosh. Are you kidding me? He's a free $20 million bonus.
as Bruce Brown.
He makes everybody paid.
Mhm.
Okay, second team, the New York Knicks.
You're gonna think I'm crazy. This team is 18-16. They have won 8 of their last 10 games. When I watch the Knicks play contenders like the Celtics and they get destroyed by 27 points, I know they've had wins over the Nuggets twice and the Rockets and a couple of other teams. They've had a lot of nice wins this year. But when I watch them play Boston without Mitchell Robinson and their bench is basically just one or two guys deep, it seems like the Knicks aren't close to the top 10 talent of the Eastern Conference. And I feel like the Celtics are taking a slight step back, of course, with Drew Holiday aging. And Chris has been excellent, but everyone else has kind of been quiet within that starting lineup. The Knicks, to me, don't feel like they're a team on the same level of the Cavaliers or the Celtics. I think it has a lot to do with that rim protection at the five and how much pressure that puts on their perimeter defense because Mikal has not been the same defender. He's been really good offensively, but I look at the Knicks and I say they have great offense. They have a top 10 player in Jalen Brunson. But after that, their defense is not on par with contenders. And with how much minutes Tom Thibodeau is driving his top five guys, Josh Hart included, in the regular season, I'm reasonably skeptical they're going to run to the ground the way they were last year, where this team was decimated by injuries and ran out of players in the second round. So I don't think the Knicks are I don't think the Knicks are a contender. To me, I think they're the best example of a pretender in the Eastern Conference.
I think you're totally right. And for me, it's as simple as, unfortunately, because I love him, I think Karl Anthony Towns with this team, his flaws could really be exposed against great big man teams in which he kind of struggles against bigs in the playoffs. He struggles when you target him on the pick and roll. Jalen Brunson isn't necessarily a great two-way player. The Knicks aren't a great defense.
Yeah.
I think they have too many defensive holes despite their star power to contend.
I
Next,
mean,
continue.
real quick, yeah. The Celtics were starting Luke Cornett and Al Horford, and Karl Anthony Towns played one of his worst games of the season. Like, they looked like they were on two completely different levels. So to me, Knick fans should be excited that they have a absolute franchise face in Jalen Brunson, but to invest $300 million into this wing duo with 6 first-round picks, you move on from multiple young players, which I understood. I thought the OG trade was good, and to still not be a contender, to me, is a huge red flag moving forward because I feel like the Knicks have something special at this five. I think Josh Hart this year has been fantastic. Karl Anthony
Fantastic.
Towns having his best season, and the wing duo on paper is perfect. It's picturesque, but there's still something missing in spite of that.
No, you're totally right. And I think we're going to have a conversation down the road. It's early, but the Knicks didn't do a great job managing assets. They stumbled into Julius Randle. They stumbled into Jalen Brunson. Great. They had all of these first round picks. They had RJ Barrett. They had Emmanuel Quickly. And essentially, they turned it all into Cat, OG, and Mikal. 3 really good players. But if you're winning a championship, is that enough? And 1 year later, after they make those moves, it looks like some big names could be available soon. So
The best example of that was in 2022 when they extended Mitchell Robinson and they signed Isaiah Hartenstein, which was a remarkable contract, came from the Clippers. After Mitch missed, I believe it was 40 to 50 games, 51 games in 2022, 2021, the year before, they should have immediately looked at trading Mitchell Robinson and handing the keys to the starting center spot to Isaiah Hartenstein. If they moved off of Mitch before he's had more injury issues and he hasn't played a single game this year, and they had Isaiah Hartenstein right now, it would be a no-brainer they're a contender. But not only is Mitch the notably worse player than me, he's the worst offensive player, he's the worst rim protector, he's a great rebounder, but so is Isaiah Hartenstein. iHeart's basically, to me, I think Mitch Robinson's like a B plus version to iHeart as a top 10 center in the NBA. If you put iHeart at the 5 with Karl Towns, I believe they can even go up against the Celtics, and that one big blemish they have would be solved.
I totally agree. And let's continue this series. Cleveland Cavaliers, contender, pretender.
They're a contender to me. Their offense this year has completely leveled up. It's improved more than any group in the NBA. And I'm very confident Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs is going to take his game back to the level of a superstar, because we saw in Utah when he had those kind of quiet campaigns, it was really a storm brewing for late April into May. Last year, he got hurt in the Celtics series, but they still took a game in game two without Jared Allen playing. I know Porzingis was hurt, but both teams are missing their quality centers, their fourth best players. And I look at the Celtics this year slightly getting worse. I think it really comes down to Drew Holiday being excellent last year. This year hasn't been quite the same player. Derek White last year was fantastic. This year's taken a slight step back. When you look at them relative to their biggest counterpart, the Celtics, I believe the Cavaliers have improved enough to make this conversation of who's the best team in the Eastern Conference a real question. And I believe the last piece of the puzzle was DeAndre Hunter, because he's somebody who can guard up onto a Horford, but he could also guard down threes. And I believe you put Hunter on Jaylen Brown a little bit, you put Mobley on Tatum, they can match up enough for their offense, which is the league's best, to take that series to 7 games. And a 7-gamer, I like this Cavaliers team quite a bit.
I think you made great points, and I think the Cavs are the most complete team in the league right now. I think the Cavs are the most complete. I think DeAndre Hunter really completed this roster in a way where if I said there's two things they're kind of missing. They're kind of missing a backup big, and that's not a huge deal to me because they have two all-star caliber bigs.
Right.
And they were missing just a very lengthy, dynamic two-way wing. And DeAndre Hunter, you have this 6'8" guy with length and strength you could just throw onto people now and just harass people to another level in which you couldn't 2 months ago because your best option for that was Isaac Okoro recently. But he can also be so dynamic as a scorer. Like, is there a better quote-unquote fifth starter in the league?
That's what I'm thinking. It's a short list. It's Derek White, maybe one of the guys in Oklahoma City, Lou Dort or Hartenstein, and then after that, DeAndre Hunter was just averaging 19 a game on good efficiency as a plus defender in his age 27 season as a wing player on a contract in the next 2 years. The Cavaliers got him for 0 first-round picks. They got him for Caris LeVert having a great year in a couple of seconds. But, I mean, if the difference between that and, like, real draft compensation is Georges Niang, that's one of the biggest moves of the deadline. It's great value, and it's the perfect fit in that lineup. So I love that move. I give that move an A. If he's healthy, it changes everything.
Speaking of asset management, talk about Atlanta I mean, look, the trade for DeJounte was great. I just still can't get or the trade to get Dyson Daniels and those guys was great.
Yeah, moving off of DeJounte, because trading for
the first trade was awful.
Wonder. Yeah,
the first trade was awful. The second trade was pretty good, and I still like Versace. I get that, but I still wouldn't have dealt their number 2 scorer. I mean, you don't have your first round pick in 25. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
To play devil's advocate, they have a litany of young wings who they're trying to play. Hunter's from a past regime. He's dealt with some injury issues, and he didn't quite fit into this core's timeline. I know he's younger. He's 27, but he fits a lot better at the Cavaliers, which is a younger win-out team, opposed to the Hawks, who are trying to do a full rebuild. If you want to make the case that...
Rebuild without your picks, though.
If you want to make the case that, one, they don't have their first-round pick this year, good point. But the other aspect is that you need to give Trae Young a reason to stay. And bottoming out is probably not going to be what entices him to want to stay, unless you land one of the top 3 prospects, one of the top 2 prospects in this draft class. Then yes,
it's 26 now, though.
I saw it coming because of the fact that it was a completely different regime, and I felt like their timeline has really transitioned from these 27-year-olds to like the 22-year-olds and below. So I kind of felt like this was an inevitable move.
Yeah, it doesn't make it smart, in my opinion, but. Let's move to the next team. I'm going to give you 2 more teams, all right? Because we kind of agree with like OKC and Boston, whatever. I'm going to ask you, Los Angeles Lakers, is this team a contender with Luka Doncic?
This one's the one I'll have to think about the most, but the answer is going to be yes. And you're going to think, well, they have no rim protecting. Jackson Hayes, their starting center, and they have maybe 6 rotation players who you can look at and say that's a playoff caliber player. But when you give LeBron James a offensive supernova, a one-man offense, and now you let LeBron play second fiddle in the postseason, these two are not only going to have the luxury of attacking mismatches together, and their IQ, their ability to create advantages is going to extend possessions for each other, but you're pairing them off of most of the time quality shooters. So you've got LeBron Luca with Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, and Dorian Finney-Smith, who was great in Brooklyn, continuing to shoot quite well here in his limited time with the Lakers. And Jackson Hayes, for all of his faults, is a quality finisher. If he is the new Dwight Powell for Luca, you can live with that. Luca took Dwight Powell, Reggie Bullock, DFS, and might have been Tim Hardaway Jr., if I'm remembering correctly, or Spencer Dinwiddie specifically, to
Mhm.
the NBA Finals. And the team they lost to in the Warriors then comfortably won the round later. So Luca is one of the best examples of a guy that's more or less. I'm not too worried about this team not having it all put together because beyond those 5, you've Dalton Connect off the bench. You have Vando for 15 minutes a night playing that role of a defensive rebounding stalwart. He can't close. Okay, fine. But what if Gabe Vincent can give you some of what he replicated in Miami as a starting guard on a contending caliber team? So
Mhm.
I'm gonna say yes with the Lakers. They have a lot of faults, but at the end of the day, they have Luka, LeBron, decent amount of spacing, and JJ Redick's done a good job so far. So I think it's the closest one. But I can't call a team of Luka a pretender. If he's healthy, no way.
This is our first disagreement. I'm going to lead pretender because there's a few factors. Number one, you mentioned the big man thing. And yeah, I agree. Offensively, I think Jackson Hayes will be elevated and Luca could do great with athletes and he's
They did
had
it with Dwight
experience.
Powell.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But they also didn't really contend until Gafford and Lively, who are real centers.
They
And
went to the conference
but
finals.
nobody thought they had a chance. Let's just be honest. I didn't think they had a chance at least. I mean, I didn't think they were like a contender. I thought they were a contender. Like they were better
Hey,
than
if you go to the
Portland
conference
a
finals,
few.
they're a contender. You can't do this.
Look, I thought they were better than like a Portland Western Conference team or an Indiana, but I didn't actually think they had a chance with the Warriors that year. I was rooting for Dallas, but I didn't think so. I still have a lot of defensive questions with this team. Last 11 games have been fantastic defensively. It's going to be very interesting to see how much of that is Anthony Davis because he missed 5 games in that 11 game stretch. So they
Mhm.
are holding up. So we'll see how much replacing those 6 Anthony Davis games with Luka Doncic in an integration process with LeBron being at 40. A lot of uncertainties defensively still for me, but also I just think it's really hard as much as the IQ's there and they have some players who work with Luka. I just believe integrating a superstar just takes time, and I haven't mainly because we don't see many superstar trades mid-season,
Right.
but asking a superstar to go to a brand new team that's kind of an imperfect fit and just
Yeah.
be a contender right away immediately that particular season, for me that's a lot to ask.
True. But how often do we see a superstar trade alongside LeBron James, who in year 22 is
Year
playing some of his best
22,
basketball?
right? I'm just
Correct.
saying. Year
He's
22.
also playing some of his best basketball. You watched that Warrior game from a couple weeks ago where he dropped 42, 17, and 8? Or how about that game versus the Knicks where they won by 20 points, posted 33, 12, and 11? A couple nights before, he did the same exact thing versus the Sixers. They lost that game. But LeBron is having, and this is like, this he's my goat. This is
I agree.
this level of longevity is unheralded. It is
Insane.
taken for granted. I watch these games and I just laugh because this man turned 40 a month ago and he is still an elite top 15 player. He's also the best player Luka's ever played with. He's better than Kyrie. He's better than Kristaps. Brunson did not level up until he left because he had that opportunity. So you give him that and a decent amount of shooting. He's got 4 shooters. 3 of them are going to be on the floor at all times. And Jackson is an elite finisher. This is someone that's one of the best players around the rim, and he's playing with one of the best lob passers. And I believe that that could really be a formula for an elite offense. The defense won't be great, but they have enough players. DFS, Vincent, Vando, Rui, and LeBron can be solid enough on the
He
wings.
hasn't been this year. He hasn't guarded a Gatorade bottle right here. So
Yeah, but in the playoffs, we expect LeBron and Rui to be pretty
we'll
solid,
see. We'll see.
and they can guard up on the fours. So I'm optimistic, and part of that's the coaching.
I think you speaking from glass half full and I'm speaking glass half empty. For me, it's just because I think it's more of a quarter full versus 3/4 empty. Because I see the scenarios you're presenting. I just think that's like a 1 in 5, 1 in 6, top 20 percentile outcome. And I just think it's more likely to be in the, front 80%. I won't say bottom because that sounds negative. I'll just say front 80%. I don't think it's going to like bottom out because I think the culture here is going to be very good with
Right.
LeBron and Luka and the respect they have. I'm also interested to see how Austin Reeves plays in response to this because he's really started to pop as that kind of secondary creator the
Yep.
last couple months. So he dropped 45 the other week. I mean, it's something to navigate.
Yep.
So I just think they have a lot to figure out. And it's really hard to ask a team to figure that out with a new coach here. There's a lot going on here. That's all I'm saying. So
I forgot Reeves, another solid defender.
yeah, and my last team I'm going to give you for tonight is the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yep. I love that you gave me this last one because them and the Lakers to me are the 3A and the 3B in the Western Conference. And I look at the way Jaren Jackson's played and John Morant's playoff resume, and I lean with them being contenders. This year, they've had their best offense in the Ja era, and their defense is going to continue to be elite with Jaren. My only reservation with this team, some might think I'm going to say it's going to be shot creation. After trading away Marcus Smart, I am skeptical about this team's point of attack defense because Marcus, for as much as he struggled, was their best POA defender, and Dylan Brooks is no longer here. So you're going to count on Jalen Wells, who's been a big success story. He was, man, the 39th overall pick in this year's drafts, a unheralded prospect at a Washington State and Simona State University. I mean,
Unreal.
he
Yeah.
came out of nowhere, but you're looking at him to be like your primary POA defender because after that, your next best defender in the perimeter is Desmond Bain or Gigi Jackson, or of course Vince Williams, who just came back, missed all the season. He's played 6 games, and he has to kind of integrate back into a rotation that's the deepest in the NBA. So on paper, you could say it's gonna be easy for him and Gigi to just bounce back in, but they have the luxury of having so many rotation players that you kind of have to pick and choose who you want to prioritize developing. And based off of how well they've played this year, they have this fourth best net rating in basketball. They're 36 and 18. They're the second seed. So, especially with that cushion they give themselves, they're a contender to me. I like them a little bit more than the Lakers. I think their floor is higher. But my one skepticism with them is that I don't look at Jalen Wells being this point of attack stopper. And if he's not that, then they're going to have some leaky issues leading to Jarrett having to have a big role. And that can maybe lead to some foul issues and how to do more. But until then, I think him and Ja have been it's it's kind of interesting. He's been the better player this year. And it feels like
Easily.
maybe Ja is starting to slowly hand the keys to Jaren where it's a codependency. Like these two are sharing the load. It's Ja's team. He's the face of the franchise. He's the one that represents the city. And I think he's matured quite a bit, but also missed 20 games. He's had his least productive season since his rookie season. And the 3-point shooting hasn't developed. The mid range game hasn't taken that triumphant step forward where a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who's so athletic, has been
Yeah.
able to kind of balance out that athleticism with the skill development. So there are some questions with Ja, I get. But unless he's playing AD in the playoffs, I'm confident he's going to raise that level because he is someone that puts so much pressure on the rim. So I'm going to go with the contender. I know I'm going to give you a big diatribe. But what do you think about do you think the Marcus Smart trade was done? Because that's honestly like one of the biggest questions for me.
I mean, they added him in a pick to get off of him.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah.
Value wise, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I wonder, it's kind of like the Luka deal. What was in the background of that deal? There had to be some, frustration on the side of Marcus Smart. There had to be, maybe he was disgruntled and they were just like, it's going to be toxic to keep him. We have a lot of picks that we can work with and hand them over to another team. There had to be something like that because it doesn't make a lot of sense otherwise. But I think that kind of capitalizes on one question I have about Memphis. Just, are they too young? What is their rotation? I mean, it's a good problem to have, but when you lower it to just 9 guys, who are you leaving out and what is the opportunity cost? How ready are Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams? What do these bench players outside of your core 3 really look like in a context of, okay, we're trying to win a championship now. We're no longer young, cute, and fun. We got to contend. And we just haven't seen these guys in the playoffs because the core around those recent second seed Grizzlies teams were just different. There were a lot of veterans who moved off to different teams, and now you're even younger post deadline. I question the youth, and the last question I have is, what is wrong with Ja Morant? Because he's not only been bad, he's been frustrating to watch. He hasn't been the same top 10 point guard recently. All year, you could say he's borderline top 10, whatever, but he's been inefficient. He's barely cracking 20. He's always going to be who he is defensively. And his playmaking, he's an exceptionally gifted passer. I would argue that's his best trait right now. But the scoring has really taken a step back. There hasn't been the same amount of just Ja Morant year 3 moments of, the crazy alpha that he was when he was young. It just, he needed to kind of ground himself because I think some of that got him in trouble off the court as we came to see. But how much of that did he lose and how much of that can he bring back? Can we get back a lot of the old Ja Morant? Because if they can't, and this is the Ja Morant they're getting the rest of the year, they're not contending that way.
So I made a mistake. This is his least productive season in this year too, 2021, where he averaged 19 and 7. Remember what he did in that playoff series versus Utah? 5 games,
crazy. 30 points.
30 points and 8 assists, 49% from the field, and Rudy Gobert, who won DPOY, if I'm not mistaken. So we've seen him have a quiet, calm campaign and then completely erupt in the playoffs versus a elite rim protector. So that's why I'm optimistic.
But the question
can
I add really quickly to that?
You go for it.
The real question I have, though, is how much of it is just a mild campaign and he's going to explode, and how much has he changed since the first couple years?
I think it has more to do with him kind of offensively speaking, starting to give the keys to his teammates, allowing them to do more. I mean, besides last season where Ja played 9 games, this is a career high for Jaren in shot attempts at 17. He's never taken more than 13 a game. So we've seen him kind of defer to his teammates more in the regular season, which I do prefer because it's allowed Jaren to get more reps and develop further. You can highlight, okay, but Desmond Bane's taken less attempts than he did in years 2 and 3. And I get that. But it also highlights the supporting cast growth. Is Ja Morant having a down season statistically? Sure, but
efficiency-wise too, though. Really inefficient.
Efficiency is really not that down.
Like, I mean, 53 true shooting?
But he's always been below league average true shooting in the regular season. He's been at league average, 57% 22, 55% 3, 57% last year, don't look at. And his first years was 55 and then 53. So for his career, he's at 55.
Yeah.
And then this season, he's at 55 too.
Yeah.
So his efficiency hasn't changed at all. Like, it's the exact same. 3-point shooting, his 2-point shooting, and he's getting to the foul line 6 times. That's a little bit lower than 7 and 8 in his 2 peak seasons. But you look at the supporting cast, while Jaws had his down season, it's been a career year for Santi Aldama, a career year for Jay Huff, a career year for Scottie Pippen, their backup guard. Same goes for Jake LaRavia, who was pretty solid for them in his minutes played. And it just goes down the entire list of one player after another. I know they moved LaRavia, which I was like kind of iffy on because I felt like he was playing well for them, but understood they're trying to consolidate their talent. One player after another, they've continued to have these kind of career years. Even Luke Kennard's shooting 48% from 3, leading the league in 3-point shooting. So I feel like it has more to do with him kind of letting his teammates take more of the mantle, and it's worked out quite well.
Yeah, it's going to be something I need to wait and see. Like I said, it hasn't felt right. It just hasn't looked right.
Okay.
And I'm going to re-emphasize, I'm not saying what he did was 3% as bad as what Watson did, but I'm just saying like a lot has happened for Ja the last 2 years, right? A lot from
A lot of it's injury related though.
suspensions. Yeah, I was going to highlight that. The self-inflicted 2 suspensions and then the injury on top of that, while also still getting a lot of the media stuff from what he did in his own doing the last 2 years. That stuff, especially in those years of like age 23 to 25, it can have an impact on a person. And I'm not saying it's like it's breaking him. It just might be a transition phase of his career into the type of personality we're going to see from him going forward, if that makes sense.
That's fair.
And also, I think before we end the show, we were talking about Nas Reed before the show. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember,
Yeah.
what was our topic?
I had to take. So we're talking about Minnesota, and I highlighted that. And this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but when discussing Anthony Edwards and kind of what fits his game best and what maximizes the T Wolves lineup, they traded Karl Anthony Towns this last fall for not a whole lot. It was Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a first round pick. And when watching Minnesota this year, Nas Reed looks like the better player than Julius Randle. People are going to say, oh, you're crazy. Julius Randle's a 2-time All NBA player, and he meant so much to the Knicks, which is true. He meant so much when an offense was built around him and catered to his strengths. And with him as their best player, they're a bottom 5 offense in the NBA. And when I watch him this year in Minnesota, and then I compare that to Nas Reed, who has been coming off the bench, Nas Reed, who they're not designing their offense and giving as many plays and building the offense around, has been more productive. He's the better shooter, the better creator, the more complementary second option. Defensively, he's been more impactful. I look at what Nas Reed does and I compare that to Julius Randle, and I don't think it's crazy like you tweeted to move Julius Randle to the bench, have him run the second unit, kind of basically funnel the his runs, and then have Nas, who's shooting 41% from three for a second year in a row in 5 attempts, start at the 4. Because I think at this point in their careers, anybody can average 20 a game. It's the players who can do it without having plays drawn up and an offense designed around them and having the ball in their hands every possession. So it really comes down to who can, in the flow of the game, score and play and contribute more efficiently. And that's been Nas Reed to me. And I think it's a good case study in the NBA of, all right, points per game doesn't fully encapsulate who's a more impactful player.
I have some nasty takes about Nas Reed that really started developing for me over the last 2 months now, because he had a lot to adjust to when the Randall deal came around, because I thought Finch went way too far over the edge of trying to make it work with Randall instead of making the team work. I think Nas Reed has all-star potential pretty easily too, because look, he's as good of a shooter as Karl Anthony Towns. That's just, he is making as many on the same, if not better efficiency in 10 less minutes a game. He is a more willing shooter. He can do it off the dribble. I mean, watch the Portland game where he's just like, all of his threes are step backs off the dribble. Move, step back. How many 6'10", 6'11" guys in shoes can do that? He has a top 3 shoot jump shot among bigs in the league, a top 3 handle. He's got IQ. He's athletic, can finish with both hands. He is switchable. I mean, as a starter, he's a 20-8 guy. Since Randall got hurt against Utah, he's been around 22-9. Efficient. I just think Nas Reed, it might be kind of like what I said. It might be sort of similar to the Jalen Brunson situation, where once you give him, a front seat, if not the keys, the production is going to skyrocket. And I mean, if we just get rid of the bench label, if we get rid of the draft pick label and say top 10 percentile athlete as a big, top 1 percentile handle and jump shot, and top 10 percentile IQ, that's a pretty darn good player. And he's 25 years old. I mean, yeah, he should start over Randall, not only because he's a better player than Randall, but because Anthony Edwards as a playmaker is much more of a driving kick than he is finding the pick and roll big. So his playmaking is far enhanced with Nas Reed. And with the way Nas Reed plays, my child, Jaden McDaniels, has more freedom on the ball, and we've seen a big difference on that lately. So I just think the pieces fit more with Nas Reed. which is, by the way, why he did the cat trade. It wasn't about Julius Randle. It was about the flexibility with Dante's contract and the draft pick and betting on the young players. And what Randle gave you was Grady. So it helps your case for why you transition from Cat to Naz Reid, who's in that Ant timeline. And we'll see how Cat's body ages in his 30s. So I'm excited about Naz Reid, and I'm sure I have more nasty opinions. And I've done some crazy Naz Reid memes in the last 2 years. So it's kind of cool that they're starting to sort of mean something.
Right. I will say there's two things. One, I don't think we can overlook what Naz Reid's been doing as a shooter. Cat's been doing that for 8 years.
Yes.
I can't go as far as say he's truly Cat as a 3-point shooter. I don't think that's fair to Cat. But, and this is a very good point, they have needed shot creation desperately and really just scoring pop where it can kind of fit in opposed to taking away. And I don't mean this to dismiss Julius Randle, but he is someone that eats up possessions and isn't the most efficient in doing so.
Yeah.
Nas fits in so perfectly, like you highlighted with Ant, where he gives you that scoring juice you've lacked this year. He elevates those other players like Jaden, even Non, his minutes by fitting into the lineup more seamlessly. But he is one of the best candidates in the NBA of a player who's in year 5 or 6. He's been in the NBA for over half a decade now, since 2020, that hasn't been an all-star yet, that might just be able to make one in the future later in his career and isn't the traditional first-round pick. Because when you look at these second-round picks, these guys, and Nasri wasn't even drafted. He should have been in the second round, at least. I'm shocked.
That was so crazy. Yeah.
Maybe he wanted to. That happened to Reeves, a good example of a player who was going to get taken in round 2. A lot of these players don't have the traditional path of being given the minutes. Jalen Brunson's a great example until they kind of had it laid out for them, and then that opportunity allows them to realize their full potential. And there seems to be a little bit more in store for Nas. So I'm not totally against him maybe making a push one day. And in the Western Conference, it's tough as hell. But in his limited time, he has been remarkably efficient and productive. And if you want to even take a look at those per 36 stats, I don't want to get you too excited because I feel like
21 and something, I bet.
Right now it's 28 and 3 on 7 3-point attempts. And last year it was the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the year before it was even better on slightly worse efficiency. So
way less minutes too.
20 and 8 per 36, 41% from 3 on 7 attempts, 3 3-point makes a game. There's something to that. And I don't think 24 minutes a game is nearly enough for how much he's able to contribute to defensively at the 4.
And watch how he's handled like playing a team like OKC the other night where he gets 27, 13, and 7. And Ant's obviously the primary focus, but it was Naz Reid who needed to create the bulk of the offense because Ant had an off night. Yep. Or the game against Portland in which Portland's been the number 1 defense for like 12 games in a row now. And Naz Reid was everything. Ant didn't play that game. He was the primary creator. He was just like, okay, you're going to take away my shot off the catch. I'll just start beating you off the dribble. Step back, get to the rim, get to both hands. I mean, He's got a unique skill set, and I just think it's all about opportunity with him. And last point, high school, he was a top 10 recruit. So this isn't a guy who just comes out of nowhere. He was he should have been a high draft pick in weird set of circumstances by his own doing, mainly because he was out of shape. That's why he slipped. It was never about talent with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he was a top 5 prospect, top 10 recruit coming out of Roselle Catholic here in Jersey. I mean, I thought he was going to be a lottery pick. And within 1 year, he fell from lottery to
undrafted,
not in the top 60. And that's a blessing for Minnesota.
You want to hear a peak fandom moment? I know exactly where I was when I saw Naz Reid got signed by the Timberwolves.
Where?
I was laying on my bed, and I had like my body kind of positioned out the window, and I just grabbed my phone off the little side desk. I'm like, oh, we got Naz Reid. I don't know why I remember that, but it's because Naz Reid has literally ruined my life. In my school, in our journalism department, my friends and I made an 89-page document of Naz Reid memes. And the girl I liked at the time, I was willing to go this far to show how much I like Naz Reid. She was a Taylor Swift fan, and I sent her a picture of Naz Reid with Taylor Swift.
There you go.
Yep.
That's how you do it.
Not a good idea, but you live one time.
That's how you do it, man. I like that's some riz. That's some W riz. I like that.
It really isn't. It was a really bad idea, but it's cool. It didn't turn out bad. It was funny.
Each their own.
Oh, you live one time, man. But I think that's a good way to embarrass myself and end the show. Mm-hmm. This is episode 15 of Objectively Biased. John, it's always a pleasure to do these shows with you. We got an hour and a half in. It's almost 1 a.m. your time. Holy guacamole. Yep. Whew. Okay.
And no class tomorrow, man. Nothing but homework. And getting to post this on YouTube. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, my friend. Well, I'll see you around. All right.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Awesome. We'll see you next time. This is Objectively Biased.